Welcome to Podcast Answers, the show where I help people start and grow their podcast, answering any podcasting questions along the way. That's right, guys. Today, we are going to be answering podcast questions, and this is something that is kind of new to me. We're going to be talking about AI today and using AI to do your podcast and have it create things for your podcast. And I've not actually done this for very much, but for this episode, I actually did do it. I created a cover art for this episode. And so today we're going to be talking about that. AI is all the rage today. You see it from ChatGPT. Everyone's doing things with ChatGPT. In fact, last night I was at somebody's house and they were just playing around with ChatGPT. They were uploading pictures and asking the ChatGPT to describe the people in the pictures. So they were saying, please describe in words, in very much detail, about the person that's actually in this picture. And it was interesting to see the stuff that would come back from ChatGPT, because ChatGPT was talking, they would do all sorts of crazy stuff. ChatGPT was explaining, this is a very handsome young man who has an audacious smile and his eyes are beaming like the sunbeams. And it was kind of ridiculous to listen to hear ChatGPT actually describe someone in that way. So I've not really, I have to admit, again, I've not really used AI in my podcasting until now. And so I was starting to notice that you could generate art and you could generate a lot of things. And so I was like, this is something that I kind of want to talk about on Podcast Answers because lots of people are using it. So what are some ideas? What are some ways that we can use not just ChatGPT, but AI? So content ideas. So this is something that I actually did recently is I asked ChatGPT, something that pertained to my podcast. In this case, I ask them, what are people asking about podcasting? What are people talking about podcasting? What are people wondering about podcasting? And I got a list of things back, and I elaborated on some of those, and I went ahead and copied them down. Now, don't just copy all of the things that it comes down with and make a podcast about it, right? So you're not just going to want to take the stuff that comes back from ChatGPT and bring it in to your podcast as that. You don't want to do that. You want to change it up a little bit. Do your own research. Use it as a research tool. Use ChatGPT as something like a research tool where you're not just going out and copying what it says, because who knows where it's actually getting that data from. I mean, yes, it is AI, it is artificial, but it is pulling the ideas. It was trained on something. So it is pulling those ideas from somewhere. So don't just copy and put that in your podcast. Don't just have it generate a script. Don't just say, hey, ChatGPT, what can I use podcasting for? Or what can I use AI for in my podcast? And then copy that down to make an episode. It's like, I didn't do that for this episode. I did not say, hey, I'm going to go and create my podcast episode and to just use the content that ChatGPT gives me. No. What I do is I put all of that in my Notion book. I use Notion for capturing all of my podcast ideas. I use Notion for having it so that you can I can keep track of my podcast episodes that I've produced and things like that. And so what I do is I don't necessarily take all of the things that ChatGPT says. I copied a few things down for ideas, for episode ideas, for content ideas. But then what I did is I actually expounded on my own. I did research on my own. I didn't just copy down what I was going to be talking about from ChatGPT. I expanded on my own. Now, another thing you can do is, and I did mention Notion, and that's the app that I use to keep all of my ideas, my episode ideas, and kind of write down what I'm going to be talking about. And Notion actually has an AI text prompt. And so do a lot of different apps right now. But what you can do is, even in Notion, you can type in and ask it things. You can ask it to come up with a 3-point talk on how to better yourself, or whatever your topic is about. You can use apps like Notion, because a lot of apps are incorporating AI right into their app, and able to bring in prompts right in their app. So you can use something like Notion, and it has a text prompt. In fact, you know what? I wonder if I can do this right as we do this episode. So if let's see, I'm going to ask it to tell me what are 3 topics that podcasters are concerned about. And we'll see what it comes back with. So it says AI is writing, and it says the topics that podcasters are often concerned about are monetization strategies for their podcast, increasing their podcast audience and reach, improving the quality and production value of their podcast episodes, which, by the way, you can have me help you with. I can do all of these things. That's what my goal with Podcast Answers is to help you do your podcast and make it better. I help with monetizing, increasing your listener reach, improving the audio quality. And then it says these topics are all important for podcasters as they strive to create engaging and successful podcasts. So one of the things that you do need to be careful with is, when you do use AI, is make it sound like your voice. Like, those things may not sound like I am saying them. They may be sounding like AI is writing them. And so we don't want to do that. We want to be careful and concerned with the way that we talk, because, again, AI is just a computer language. It's computer. It's using a computer data model. And so the way that it spits back, and like I talked about in this beginning of this episode, when I was with my friends last night and they asked him to describe the photo, it was using words that sounded like a poem on a front of a card. It sounded like something that he would, in fact, it was funny because he was asking it to describe a picture of his wife. And so I even joked, hey, John, you should actually just write that down on a card and give it to your wife, because it sounds like a love poem, but not anything that you would say. So it would be important that if John was going to tell his wife those things, that he change it up into words that sound like John, because people aren't going to believe that it's you writing it. And the way you write is unique and special, and not anyone else is going to sound exactly like the way that you talk and the way that you write. And so it's important that you go about and actually take the content that the AI has generated and change it up a little bit. In this case, I may say that, today we're going to be talking about how to make money for your podcast, several things you can do, or increasing your, I'm going to teach you how to take your podcast and grow it really big, or, something different, or, we don't want your podcast to sound like a crappy audio production. So let's improve your audio quality. Something like that. I'm going to take the content that comes out of ChatGPT and I'm going to reformat it so that it sounds more like I am talking. Now, one of the other things that you can do with Canva is you can use it to create text in there in Canva. And again, Canva is a program that a lot of podcasters are using to generate their episode art or generate their podcast art. Canva does a lot of things. Canva, and it's great. And I may eventually do an episode on Canva specifically, because Canva does things really well. And they have a lot of templates out there that you can create graphics with, and you can create things, text in there too, and documents and presentations. And so you can even use Canva. Canva has a lot of AI in it now to write and generate text. Again, I would be careful and I would rewrite all of that. I've used, so the app that I use to live stream this podcast is called Ecamm Live. And when I'm setting up my live streams, I can put a title in there and hit a button, and then it'll come back with AI generated titles that it thinks are important. And it's funny sometimes to listen to that, to go back and figure out, and see what it actually is talking about, because a lot of times it is close, but it doesn't make sense. Or it'll give you like 3 different suggestions. And what I would suggest to do is take a combination of those 3 and make your own title. Like, don't just generate and use the title that it's going to use. In fact, for Ecamm, a lot of times it comes back and it has emojis in the title and things that I wouldn't necessarily do. I'm not going to put emojis in my podcast episode title or my live stream title. I'm just not going to do that. And so it's definitely, you definitely want to take that and change that. But again, now you can, another idea, instead of just content ideas for your podcast, and this has actually been a time saver for me, is use an AI art generator. So Canva Premium has an art generator in it. Bing.com/images/create. You can create you get 25 credits per day to create content from that. And so it's really cool. In fact, if you look at the episode art for this podcast episode, whether you're listening to it in a podcast app or you're listening to it and watching it on YouTube, the cover art for this episode is actually generated by AI. So I said, generate me an art talking about using AI in podcast creations. And so I got back this like robot type thing with a microphone hand and a headset. And it was interesting, but I thought it was a great idea to use it for my podcast episode art, because again, I could create those things in Canva. I could ask it for a robot and headset, and I could do that, but it's not necessarily going to be easy and quick. And again, quick and easy come with its downfalls. I mean, if you use something quick and easy, you get what you actually put into it. So if you don't put a whole lot into it, and I know all of my artistic friends now are screaming, saying, don't just use AI to generate your images. And I agree. But what you can do is kind of inspire it or use it, but then put your own text on top. Because again, AI doesn't do a super great job. I mean, especially doing humans. A lot of times they have extra fingers or extra hands or a hand where it's not supposed to be, or it's just really kind of creepy and strange. And so I would not have it generate people necessarily, but you can have it generate images. And it doesn't do text really great either. A lot of times it'll take text and it doesn't look quite right. The words are spelled wrong or whatever. So I wouldn't necessarily use AI to generate text in your cover art, but you could do that. You could use Canva and you can have it generate the image, and then use Canva to put text on top of your episode art. And so that's just a few things that you can use to use AI in your podcast. So again, to kind of recover, should we use it? I think it's okay to use the generated art. However, be aware there may be copyright possibilities. It could, because again, it's pulling and it's using ideas and things from other things that it was trained from. So again, in theory, it shouldn't produce something that's copyrighted. But what happens if I use it to generate my art? Someone else puts the same prompt in and gets the same thing back. Now, I don't know if they will. I mean, I don't know. I don't think that they will. I think as I've done that before, I've put the prompt in again and I get something completely different. But those are just things to think about. I think it is okay to generate art, but be aware of possible copyrights. Now, for text, I would use it for ideas only. Don't just straight copy it. It might be original material too, but be original. People can tell when things are written by AI. Like I was saying in the beginning, I'm not going to describe my wife as somebody that has eyes of the sunset raising out of it. And like, those are just not my words. They may be a poet's words. They may be somebody that is good with words, but they're not my words. And so I'm not going to have AI create content for me that I'm just going to straight put out there because that's not my content. I want to be original. Everything that you hear on this podcast is original to me. It's my ideas. And so you're not coming to this podcast to listen to AI's ideas, because you can Google that and you can read that. This is me and talking about my experience. I've been podcasting since 2007, and I've gone through a lot of podcasts and I've helped a lot of podcasters. And so I know the ins and outs of podcasting. Well, you could get some of that same thing from asking AI. It's just going to be a generic type of ideas, and it may or may not even be right. So I would suggest that you go ahead and use that as ideas, but definitely fact check. Take your podcast and fact check what it's coming back, because it may not even have the correct information. It may give you a URL for something completely wrong, or be 100% wrong. I could ask it to talk about who Andy Lehman is, and there's 100 or thousands of different Andy Lehmans out there, and it may not get the right information. So one of the things that you definitely need to do is fact check your episodes. Fact check whatever it's coming back with, making sure that it is 100% right and it's 100% in your words, because you want to make sure that your podcast is unique. So guys, this podcast is value for value. And if you've received any value from the ideas and topics that I've shared on this podcast, I ask that you consider giving back some value, either your time, your talent, or your treasure. And I'm looking to get a new Shure SM7B microphone for this podcast setup. I just have a really generic microphone, but I love the sound of the Shure SM7B. And if you want to help contribute to this fund, check out podcastanswers.com/help out. So podcastanswers.com/HELPOUT. And if you would like to give back, if I've ever given you any insight or any value from this podcast, go to podcastanswers.com/help out. I really appreciate the support on this, because it's just something else that would help me take my podcasting to the next level. So if you want to help out, I would really, really appreciate it. Guys, until next time, I just ask that you go out, keep podcasting, and just really take your podcast to the next level, whatever that means. Take the next step to get out there and do your podcast well. Until next time, guys, have a safe week and keep podcasting.